Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Familiar with the Matter, the show where I talk to people who know things about stuff. And today, my guest is Christopher Cooksey, filmmaker, director, producer, writer, podcaster, all types of things. And he has a new film out soon to come on Tubi, but is also available elsewhere. We'll get into that, called The Quantum Terror. We're going to talk about that, amongst other things. Christopher Cooksey, thank you for joining me.
Hello, and thank you for having me on the show. I hope everybody tuning in is having a wonderful day.
So, on the off chance that people have no idea who you are or what you do, who are you and what do you do?
Well, my name is Christopher Cooksey, like you said. Sometimes I'm also known as Christopher Moonlight. That was kind of the earlier phase of my artistic career, so I've now parlayed that into calling my production company Christopher Moonlight Productions. I started out as a very young kid wanting to do films, and then I discovered comic books and I wanted to do comic books, and then that led to me doing some underground comic book work, zine work, showing in galleries, and ultimately coming back to film because that was always where my passion lay. But sometimes you got to try out a bunch of stuff before you realize that. I started experimenting with short films. I was lucky enough to meet some very talented people who were professionals who gave me guidance. And after moving from California to Austin, I decided I was going to make a feature-length film, which is The Quantum Terror, which is kind of a metaphysical, surrealist, Carl Jung, H.P. Lovecraft, Lewis Carroll inspired horror movie that leaves most people scratching their head.
So now, so you don't have any formal training, right? You're just kind of, did you go to, maybe my brain just turned up. Did you go to school for directing and filmmaking and such?
No. I mean, my school was essentially ignorance and curiosity.
That's the best kind.
Yeah, well, you know, I have a very early memory of, being a kid and watching a lot of, the typical stuff that kids in the 80s watched, Saturday morning cartoons, movies like Star Wars, Star Trek, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the various Roger Corman knockoffs that you would happen across in the video store and be too young to realize that they were supposed to be cheap knockoffs. I just thought they were great. Mm-hmm. And, I started to really kind of obsess. I don't know if obsess is the right word. I have various learning disabilities. And what people don't realize is that with learning disabilities come other things. I think it's kind of like an autism spectrum thing where your brain just functions in different ways. So I did a lot of pretend play. And as a kid, it never stopped. It was always, the fantasy was always with me, which caused my parents to say, hey, maybe this kid needs to go to a psychiatrist. And I mean, there were different things, odd things about me. I have something called stemming, which is kind of like involuntary noises and hand movements that happen sometimes when my brain is going. It's sort of like Tourette's.
I was about to say, Tourette's.
Yeah, and it's so you understand. So, I understand why my parents were like, maybe we should get this kid checked out. But I remember the psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever they took me to, asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I'd like to do special effects. And I think I was maybe 6 or 7 at the time. It was a very early memory. And the psychologist was like, okay, simple solution. This kid needs to watch less TV. Which is like, so then it became like, how do I sneak in TV when my parents aren't watching?
Right.
And so, but I used to, go and try and build stuff. And then you get these behind the scenes specials that would come on TV about, people like Dennis Mural and Phil Tippett doing the blue screen and the stop motion stuff for Star Wars. Sometimes you get stuff about animators, Wonderful World of Disney, that sort of thing. And I would go into the garage and I would find bits and pieces of things. And at first we didn't have a lot of money. Usually if I got toys, it was when my grandparents were visiting. I mean, we were lower middle class. I remember my parents having months where they were struggling to make payments and that sort of thing. So my dad was a woodworker, so there was lots of scraps of wood. So I remember literally hammering together pieces of wood and trying to turn them into transformers because I didn't have the transformer toys I wanted, and trying to color them with crayons. And then there was a field trip to an observatory. So I started trying to hang balls from the garage and make my own solar system. And then as time went on, as I got older, I was making haunted houses where I would come up with little tricks like hang chains from the wall and put fishing line on them. So you'd pull the fishing line and the chains would move up and down and just little things like that. And I kind of never stopped doing that. And as I got older and I realized that, the kids that would make fun of me for having a toy I made or a knockoff toy or something like that, I realized they were the ones that were missing out because I was the one that said I can't have that, but I can make that, or I can build my own version of it that's even better.
Right.
So it just kind of snowballed from there, discovering that I could draw and I could make my own stories in comic books.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, but
that's fine.
A lot of it kind of stems from that and then goes into, like I said, as specials would come on, and then, back in the day of VHS, I would tape the special. So I would watch it over and over again obsessively if there was something about the making of an Alien movie or Star Wars or something. Yeah. That's what I recorded on tape. And then when DVDs started and you got bonus features, that really, boy, anyone that owns the Alien quadrilogy with the hours and hours of behind the scenes,
yes.
That's a masterclass for me. I'm sure my wife, after 20 years of marriage, is sick of seeing that played at least, quarterly, if not more. So, and then, of course, YouTube came along, and then you started getting all these people like Rob Edgar or Out of Frame or not Out of Frame. Out of Frame's a good one too, but they're more economics, which is another hobby of mine. But all these YouTubes started to break down, how shots worked, why they worked, what was going on subliminally or subtextually.
Yes.
Actors, I ate it all up and absorbed it, and that was it. That was my school.
So you're kind of a DIY filmmaker overall.
Very DIY. Yeah.
Now, I know it's a little bit back in the past. Yeah. Everyone in the chat, hello. I don't know what happens with my mic. I have no idea why it does this. The gain will just suddenly jump through the roof, and it sounds like, I think Christopher said it was like an aircraft carrier or something the last time I was on his show or something, and I don't know what to do about it.
And hello to everybody in the chat, by the way.
Yes, hello everybody. Kiever Dam, Original Shroom, and Angela Ariaga, Jaeger Pony, Mike Savage, Blarg, Noah Asensio. Who else is here? Scanner Daffley. Good morning. I think the only thing that remedies it is if I keep talking, because if I go quiet for too long, it's trying to reach for sound that's not there. I think that's it. I don't know. So I'll try to tune in a bit more here. As I am wont to do before I do a Familiar with the Matter, I do a little bit of research on my subjects to make sure I know something about who they are and what they're up to. And I saw in your curriculum vitae, as it were, that you were at least ostensibly associated with a TV show that I loved in the 90s, and I was curious to find out how you got affiliated with it, Nowhere Man. Because I love that show. Of all the things back on UPN, back when UPN was a thing, it was like Nowhere Man and The Watcher, because The Watcher was hosted by Sir Mix-a-Lot, and I just thought that was so cool. And then Nowhere Man was sort of that quasi X-Files, Chris Carter kind of mystery show. And even though I know that from your IMDb that you weren't involved in the production per se, I was curious as how you got that job.
Wow, that was kind of okay. Yeah, that is a blast from the past, and it brings back a lot of memories. So, a friend of mine had his parents had a video editing company,
Mm-hmm.
and the what was it called? Inner Video, was it? I think is what
Okay.
it was called. Um, I was very young. We were right out of high school and kind of wondering what we were going to do with our lives. And I hadn't quite resigned myself to the idea of working in the mall.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and his parents, like they had this company, and it was video editing, an early version of motion graphics. And they had like the early, I think it was Photoshop 4.0 at the time, and a After Effects type of program that, I mean, very early in the days called Director, if I recall.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so we were using that, and with Nowhere Man, essentially they had their, now you were a fan of the show, so they had his little device that had that photo on it that they called Secret Agenda.
Yes.
Well, so what we would do is we got that photograph and we broke it apart into as many layers as we could, because as the show went on, the writers had no idea where the show was going.
It was obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I have to compare it to, for those of you that don't know, the basic gist is guy goes into a restaurant with his wife, and then he goes in the bathroom, comes out, and suddenly his entire life's been erased. He doesn't exist anymore. His wife doesn't recognize him. And it's apparently all over a photograph he took as a news photographer or something in the jungle, some kind of execution. And now you spend the entire season with him sort of in a fugitive / I don't even know what you'd compare it to, but sort of that sort of situation where he's on the run from mysterious people. He's trying to solve his own life or something. It's all very surreal. And yeah, I kind of got the sense by the end of the first season, which I think it only had the one, that they really didn't plan it out. And I thought that's a really, I mean, it kept my interest, but it was sort of like, if you ever watch Battlestar Galactica, the remake, and they finally get to New Caprica, and you're kind of like, oh, the Cylons never had a plan. Oh, great. So it was a really catchy show at the time, because I was really into like X-Files and mystery stuff, and that was kind of the tone it was taking. But that was the show. But yeah, there was this singular, very important photograph of all these guys being set up for execution, and so you had to dissect this for effects or something.
Well, yeah, essentially what it was, like I said, first of all, it was openly stated that this show existed because X-Files was hot.
Yes, I felt like that, yeah.
And they wanted to do something that caught on to that. So the reason that we broke the photograph up into layers was anybody trying to analyze the photograph and figure out what it was, anyone that paid that much attention to it would have realized over time that the photograph kept changing as they like came up with plot ideas.
Yes, so I noticed that. I was like, wait a second. Hey, did they uncrop it on that one? What happened there? How that guy wasn't in the photo in the beginning of the show. That's kind of
yeah. So we kept changing it, and there was other tasks that we were put on. Like there was an episode where he went to a town where people were being hypnotized by this little emblem in the corner, kind of like, you know, the StreamYard duck.
Yes.
But it was a little castle with this rotating thing. And I remember I created this really cool graphic for it that it was like one of those things where whichever direction you set in your mind it was spinning, that's what it looked like it was spinning in.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little 2-frame optical illusion. And when it got to set, they asked for it to be changed, and I wasn't on set, so someone else changed it and removed that cool illusion. And I was like,
oh,
you know, so
man,
little things like that. And we were doing, you know, the best memory out of that was the company did some work for Independence Day.
Ooh.
And there was a motion graphic that me and my friend were sent to the set to help them shoot. And my friend had been there before, and he was like, "Yeah, he's like they broke it down, but he's like he got to see the UFO set, you know, in the Hangar 18."
Ooh, nice.
So we're there and we're helping shoot that, and I'm just kind of standing around. He's like, you know, there's a craft service table over there, you know, help yourself to some food. There's really nothing for you to do. So I go over there and it's like Hollywood craft service table, like and me being a broke aspiring filmmaker, it's like every kind of food is here. This is great. And then I look over, there's this giant green screen, and there are these guys running around, and they're like trying to catch stuff out of the air. I'm like, what's going on? It turns out they were stuffing air cannons full of toy cars and shooting them in front of the green screen at like high frame rates. So I went over to look, and one of the guys is like, you can help us catch the cars. He's like, because we got to catch as many as we can so they don't break apart, and we're done, then we don't have anything to shoot. And when there was like a $5 bill that somebody had, there was one motorcycle. It's like, whoever catches the motorcycle, gets $5. So everyone, it was impossible. They're flying through the air and they're metal cars. So you're trying to catch them and you're also trying not to get hit. So that was, just fun stuff like that. But, it didn't work out because they didn't have enough work for me, and I didn't understand the ins and outs of how that sort of thing works. So I was getting that I wasn't getting paid very often, but it was a fun experience and I'm grateful for it. And, I'm sure I came across as like a bratty kid that should have been put in his place, but it was a fun time. And it's amazing to me when people see what I've worked on, Nowhere Man, or I also did motion graphics for a show with Patrick Stewart called Safe House. It was a movie. And,
I think I remember that movie.
Yeah. So I never watched it, but there's where there's a fire and there's a computer with a stock market like ticker tape graphic. Yeah. I was the one that created and animated that graphic. So it was like little. Like they call it, there's no motion graphics category on IMDb that I could find. So they just put it under visual effects. So, but it was, as far as early motion graphics, early, programs like Photoshop and Director, really cool to kind of get that experience and kind of get started down that road.
All right. Well, let's get into sort of the meat of the stuff. When and in what way did you get introduced to H.P. Lovecraft in the course of your growing up?
It's interesting because my earliest memories of H.P. Lovecraft being mentioned were, Alien, not the movie directly at the time, because I was watching behind the scenes, but in the behind the scenes, they would talk about H.R. Giger.
Yes.
And I remember being at a bookstore, and there was a Giger book, and the cover, actually it's up there still. The cover was a little crinkled and it was kind of sitting in a dusty spot, and I was like, oh, it's Giger book, And I asked my dad. It was expensive, but my dad, since it was sitting up there, got a discount on it, and I think I was maybe 12 years old. And my dad had no idea what was in Giger's art. So I was handed this, very erotic, dark, amazing book of his art. And it was called Necronomicon 2.
Yes.
Well, actually, no, mine was called Biomechanics, but it talked about Necronomicon 1 and 2 in the book. And it talked about H.P. Lovecraft. And at first, it kind of just went over my head. But then I also discovered Bernie Wrightson, who was doing adaptations of Lovecraft stories like Cool Air, which I just thought was like this amazing story. And then from there, I was always at bookstores or libraries getting books. And I kind of went from like the kids' books and very quickly transitioned from like Chronicles of Narnia to Ray Bradbury and H.G. Wells and Lovecraft. So they're all kind of intermingled together for me, like something like War of the Worlds kind of, to me, went along with At the Mountains of Madness, the same kind of gelatinous tentacle creatures and that sort of thing. So again, my awareness of Lovecraft was kind of intermingled with all these others. And like Ray Bradbury, who I got to work for, would talk about Lovecraft in his books. And this is before Lovecraft was more of I won't say a household name, but even in fandom.
Yeah. He's become far more mainstream in the last several years, primarily because of just Cthulhu fans and things like that. But yeah, when I was growing up, I always thought my impression of Lovecraft, when I'd hear that name or hear it referenced, it was one of those things where, like, H.G. Wells, Robert Louis Stevenson, their works have been translated into movies and TV shows and all types of stuff. And so growing up, when you hear about H.P. Lovecraft, who's contemporary relatively to a lot of those early authors, or that early sci-fi horror, but there's almost not, at the time at least, there's almost nothing like mainstream about it. It always seemed like something that was not meant to be paid much attention to. Like, it was all very dark and it felt forbidden in a way because it was just so obscured. And so when I finally, and I didn't have a notion when I was a kid that, Reanimator was associated with that or anything else. And so for whatever reason, one day I got a horror bug in me, and I ordered my very first book off of Amazon was a collection of H.P. Lovecraft works. And I just remember reading Rats in the Walls. And for whatever reason, Rats in the Walls I remember it was the perfect setting. I was reading it in my bedroom. My parents were on a vacation or something. So I was all alone in the house, and I was reading it by lamplight, and it was dark out. And I just remember being scared, something from like 1922 or whatever the heck it was. And I was just like scared out of my mind reading this thing and felt so creeped out. And it's had that effect on me. And, but yeah, there was always this notion, because I'd heard of the Necronomicon before I ever really associated with Lovecraft. So I was never really sure. It was kind of like one of those Blair Witch Project things where it's like, is this actually real that I'm reading about? Was this referring to something historical, or is it vice versa? It was a long time until I found out that he made up the Necronomicon, and that somebody else decided to take that and run with it and make up some gobbledygook novel or something that they sold as the real thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I've even heard rumors, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, that even the Third Reich was interested in Lovecraft because they weren't sure, and that could be.
Oh, okay.
But I say that not as like that's a real thing or not a real thing, but those are things you hear when you're younger, and you're like, oh, is this, and of course people have taken and run with the idea that it's all true, and Lovecraft was just writing it into fiction because no one would believe it otherwise. And, all that sort of thing that sparks a young imagination and gets you to take it and run with it. And that's the wonderful thing about Lovecraft. I mean, like you said, movies, like I was also exposed to movies, and like you had no idea, or even though it was out there, it was actually in the titles, H.P. Lovecraft's, From Beyond, or H.P. Lovecraft Reanimator. Your young brain is just seeing the special effects and the crazy stuff going on, and the fact that you're watching something that, your parents wouldn't let you watch if they knew exactly what was in it, but they're not paying attention. But I love the interpretations, and I love this. I've kind of based all of my work around this Mandela effect of how do you remember it as a child versus if you went back and revisited it, you'd realize that a lot of it is kind of mutated in your mind past what it actually is. But then you realize, just like with dreams, you wake up from a dream and go, oh, that would make a great movie. I wish I would have thought of that. Oh, wait, no, it's a dream that I had. Of course I thought of it,
Right.
So you can kind of take it and run with it in a direction that no one else thought before. And that's kind of where, like I said, that's where my work is at now, not just with Lovecraftian stuff, but, I'm looking, you and I have talked about, how horrible so many franchises are now.
Yes.
And I look at them and I go, okay, it's like, this is something that I kind of get irritated with about fan films. It's like, why are you making a fan film? You could adjust that idea just a little bit and make it your own and not have to worry about copyright infringement, profit on it. You could see a return for your work, and maybe you could have something that turns into something better than what's going on now. And maybe evolve it into.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, first off, people in the chat, if you have questions or anything, I'm keeping an eye on it. So if you have any questions or anything, just throw them out there. Make sure you put like several question marks after, so I can tell it's something for us and not that you're talking amongst yourselves, as you often do. And I'll throw it up there. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot myself, because I have a hard time sort of self-generating when I'm writing or creating something or thinking about what I might do about this, that, or the other, without automatically falling back on the notion that I'm just doing something or thinking of something derivative of something that I already know, and it's so recognizable to something else that, why bother? And I think maybe part of the reason people do that is because maybe they feel that way too, and so it's easier to play in somebody else's sandbox and try to get your own idea across rather than risk looking like you're a copycat. So you might as well just go along with the flow. Maybe that's sort of an insidious way to look at it. But that also, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so that kind of leads into something else I wanted to ask you about. I watched your, was it Studio 32 essay on fear and the dangers of fear in the creative process.
Oh, wow.
And I think anybody who's a creative type or has tried writing something or has gotten nervous about making something or otherwise, or just has ever had stage fright, knows the danger of fear. And but I wanted to ask you something that's kind of converse to that. So as a creative, in your perspective, how do you measure success? Because fear is an easy thing to sort of run away from. It's like, I'm not going to do that. But how do you know when you're happy with something? I'll leave it kind of open-ended there.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, because since I did that, and I think I did a video on it. Did I write an essay?
Yes. No, I called a video essay. I just called essay, sir. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I based that essay on essentially how I was being received by people who were friends who are no longer friends now, because what I realized was that even when there is a fear in creating, and people will respond to that fear in different ways. One way is to latch themselves onto somebody else that they can then say they're dependent on for their success.
Yes. Their muse.
Yeah. Or not even a muse, but, maybe a partner or someone they consider a partner, Sure. I'm going to do this thing, but I can't do this thing until so-and-so does this other thing that will allow me to. Well, then you're dependent. And then you have an excuse why you're never fully realizing what you want to do. Yeah. Because once you do that, then it's out there for people to see and to be criticized, or my worst nightmare, people are indifferent to. I mean, indifference is very painful. We all want acceptance, but there's a fear to go and take that leap, and you have to take that leap and you have to risk it. But if you always have someone to kind of say, I haven't done it yet because of this person, then you can always talk about what it's going to be when it's done, but you never actually have to, make that leap and take that risk. And I was finding that the more that I did, the more that I was successful, and I'll talk about how I measure success in a second, the angrier those people would become, because then I'm being successful, and then they're being angry because my success is, in their mind, shining a spotlight on what they haven't accomplished yet. Right. They won't come out and say this, obviously. It's a game they play. But it's a kind of, I hate using this word because it's become cliche, but it's kind of like toxicity. It's the same mentality that a cult leader might have, or an abusive significant other. Where someone else's success and happiness is a direct reflection of, they don't want you to be successful. They want you to wallow in their, but I don't even want to call it failure, because you can't fail if you haven't tried.
Misery loves company, as it always is.
Exactly. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a very simple way of putting it, and probably the most serviceable. And that's actually what I want to talk about in terms of, going back to the idea of people saying that, what they're worried what they're creating is derivative, or
Right.
it's been done before, or it's not a very good idea, or whatever. I actually think that ideas are the last thing you should be worrying about. And I have I might have done a video talking about this as well, but I think too many people worry about being original, and they're not thinking about being serviceable.
Hmm.
You know, the first thing you should aspire to be is serviceable. If people go for great originality, greatness, all that sort of thing, they
That reminds me, this is completely off base, but there's this TV show, some people out there might know, it's called The Red Green Show. And he says, if they can't find you handsome, at least have them find you handy. That's yeah, you don't have to be original, just be serviceable. It doesn't remind me of, sorry, just that's where my brain went.
Oh, no, that's cool. It's fun to associate those things as well. But people start off trying to be original. Originality is the last thing I worry about. I like taking things from different places and kind of mashing them together in a reuse. And from working on them, from doing these things, and kind of approaching it from a place of your own personal values, originality kind of pops up in unexpected places. But I think to try and just come up with something original is folly. You have to kind of take those bits and pieces of what you love, and then you find yourself in them. Like I said, I got to work for Ray Bradbury, and Ray Bradbury loved libraries because he said, you're pulling out books, you open one up, you look, you go, this isn't the book for me, you put it back on the shelf. You pull out another one and you see yourself in that book. And that's not a narcissist thing. That's not like, oh, this person's just like me, therefore I'll read them.
Right.
What he meant is, you find someone who has, it's like opening up a well-polished mirror that reflects you back at yourself, warts and all, and the good and the bad, and you're able to see that, and you're able to think about that and see how you can improve yourself, or what your values are, and then you put that into the work. So for me, with the Quantum Terror, or I'm working on a sci-fi project called Sci-Exploitation, which is essentially my love of old 60s like color sci-fi movies, whether it be like the Destroy All Monsters, or Green Slime, or something really good like Forbidden Planet.
Yeah.
And take that grindhouse aesthetic and kind of mash them together, and then see what I come up with. And like I said, I don't dive too deep into rewatching those movies. I remember watching them as a kid and a teenager.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of depending on that Mandela effect to inform me, and then adding my values into it. And then from there, originality pops up. But if, like I said, if you're worried about being derivative, don't. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft, in his early work, which is actually some of my favorite, he's just imitating Edgar Allan Poe.
That's also true.
He writes just like Edgar Allan Poe, and he does it really well.
I love that almost antiquated, very proper. I've imitated that in a lot of my own writing, trying to sort of like parrot that, because not in the sense of like copying word for word, but trying to find that cadence, that kind of vocabulary, and way of expressing yourself in very proper but almost abstract terms. It's very complicated. Real quick, thank you, John Migda. Morb, is it Morbin time? Are we Michael Morbiusing it or something? I guess we are. John Migda wants us to know it's Morbin time. Well, thank you, John Migda. Appreciate it. All right. So sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I want to. One of my favorite openings to a book is The Time Machine, and I'll probably screw up this quote, but it was, the time traveler was expressing a recondite matter, which he punctuated with his index finger. It's like, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's always that's something that's always, as a writer, it's always kind of bugged me, and trying to come up with something. I always want to come up with that opening line that just sort of encapsulates everything without saying too much. Like the opening line of Neuromancer, "The sky over the harbor was like a TV tuned to a dead channel," and it's just like everything about that line is like, it's just. You just described the entire world of Neuromancer. You won't know that until sort of on reflection, but still. Or like the first line of what Stephen King's, like the Dark Tower or whatever. It's like the gunfighter.
The man fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
Yeah, exactly. That encapsulates everything. So sometimes when I'm writing stuff, I'm always like, it's one of those sort of writer's conceits, or maybe just me. It's like, if I can't come up with the perfect first line, I just stop and I get like an immediate writer's block, and it's just so frustrating because there's such brilliance in such simple words. It just drives me crazy.
That those opening sentences are, it's like, there's the saying, a character is only as smart as the person writing them.
Yes.
If you apply that to something like the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, absolutely.
Oh, God. Let's not go there. That's a whole other video.
But I was going to say, if you apply that to a good writer, that's not actually true, because, if you're talking about a character like Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle probably spent months of notes and preparation figuring out how Sherlock Holmes' brilliant mind was going to figure something out within minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between a good writer and a hack, is that, a good writer is willing to prepare and think about for months. For me, when I write my scripts, I have a very unusual process where I'll have a story idea and I'll just keep writing about it and going like, okay, this isn't working. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of the night, or in the middle of a shower, or, something where I'm not thinking about it all, suddenly it all kind of falls into focus.
Yes, I've had that happen.
And then I do an outline, and then I read back the outline after a few days and look for the plot holes and all that sort of thing. By the time I actually write the script, it's just a matter of typing it out, because the outline and the characters are all there. But it's months of thinking about it in preparation. And then those great lines, those great moments, again, those come from not worrying about being original. Those just come from, doing the work and making sure that you're coming from, a place of central values. What is it that you as a storyteller want to do? What do you want to give to the audience that's useful? And this is something that I'm really big on. So Alan Moore said, don't give the audience what they want, give them what they need. And I thought, well, that's really presumptuous to think that what they need. But I amended that and went like, well, if I'm coming from a place where, these are things that were useful to me, right, then maybe they'll be useful to other people. But I don't want to do it in a way that's like, no, this is useful to you. It's just like, this is where a place I'm coming from. And if I'm sincere about that, just like Ray Bradbury said, maybe someone will watch what I do or read what I do and see some of themselves reflected back at them, and then it'll be useful.
Well, it also goes into like it seems like a lot with mainstream Hollywood for a long time is the fear of making something that's not necessarily for everybody. Is trying to whittle everything down to the lowest common denominator, and not giving either the audience the opportunity to think for themselves, or just to allow something to find its own audience. Like you have to appeal to every market and every demographic at the same time, which of course turns everything into a sort of plain beige goo a lot of the time, at least in my opinion. Do you think modern general audiences could digest something that's more thoughtful and not so on the nose these days?
Oh, absolutely. I actually think that they're starved for it. Yeah. I don't think they all know that they're starved for it. I think, there's, like you said, there's this homogenized way of thinking when it comes to creating entertainment for people that, you want to make something for everybody. I think and it's easy to fall in this mentality if you're, trying to sell your wares, who's it for? It's for everybody. Everybody can enjoy it. Well, the fact of the matter is that you don't know everybody. You can't speak to everybody, but you can speak to your own experience, and you can speak to a certain audience that you feel that you relate to. And in that way, you can open yourself up to people who may not usually be interested in what you're doing, because everyone's looking for different points of view, whether they know it or not. They're looking for something new. I think my co-producer Doug Mayfield said that the most exciting things in entertainment are usually the words new and free. And yeah, people are looking for new things, and I think that's why manga and anime are doing so well right now, because those are made to speak to a Japanese audience.
Yes.
But Americans are, they're hungry for them. We had a conversation on my channel about Stranger Things, and I think, Stranger Things is a story where it's refreshing and it has its flaws, but it speaks to the side of us that wants to do the right thing, that wants to be heroic in some way. Who wants to stand by their friends. That's kind of that loyalty fantasy over everything else right now seems to be a power fantasy, and power in everything. So, for me, I know specifically who my audience is. I actually write for young men because I think that's an audience that isn't overly catered to. And I'm the only man in my house. I've got a wife and 2 daughters.
You're outnumbered.
I am. Yeah. I love them very much. But I also think that there are women who love stories that are written for men, because they, in their life, want to find and associate with men, and not these stories that tell people, the world would be better if men behaved like this. Well, that's not reality. This is the way. I want to write stories about how men behave, sometimes how bad men behave, and sometimes how good men behave, and maybe how to distinguish the difference. I do write to that, no matter how weird my stories get. And not all my stories get as weird as the Quantum Terror, but I keep young men in mind, because I feel like young men, for the most part, have been left out in the cold in terms of storytelling. And that doesn't mean, look, there's Lifetime channel for women who want those kind of stories. There's there's a channel for every kind of lifestyle. And I think that's a good thing, because, we're able to look at that. But the problem is that people are trying to take all of those things from all those different lifestyles and thought trains, whatever you want to call it, and shoehorn them into stories that should otherwise be for young men. It's like, I feel sorry that there's really no, I think maybe Captain America and Iron Man are the closest thing to what we had in terms of, when I was a kid, Han Solo, Indiana Jones, both played by the actor, or, Kurt Russell would play cool characters, that sort of things.
Man's man.
Yeah, and it doesn't even always have to be a man's man. Like, I have a story that I don't really have fully formed, but I'm thinking of, which is a romance story, but it's geared towards a man's point of view. How does a man handle being in love, and what does that entail? What are the responsibilities behind that? What does he have to do as a man to show that he is worthy of this woman, and also not be someone who's just completely submissive to a woman, which seems to be something that we are constantly peddling to young men now, and it's frustrating them. I understand why so many young men are feeling kind of left out in the cold at the moment. So I do want to do stories that speak to them, and that they can maybe see themselves in and find useful.
All right, so let's get into the main event. So how did, if at all, how did that inform your writing of the Quantum Terror? By the way, I've watched the Quantum Terror, just so everybody knows.
Oh, awesome.
I found it a much more sort of meditative experience than your standard sort of obviously run away from the monster kind of thing. But then, of course, that also lends into its H.P. Lovecraft inspirations, because Lovecraft was all very meditative and abstract about things and thoughtful. So of the characters in there, how did your focus on writing for men, if at all, inform that process?
Well, it's funny. It came at a very interesting time because my wife and I had moved from California to Austin, and I had actually left behind some things that would have otherwise been considered opportunities. And it's kind of a long story. I won't get into that story, but it involves a special effects company called Studio ADI. And I had a good job there. But I was, California was oppressively expensive even back then.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I was emotionally having a lot of trouble being, there was of course, just the matter of fact that California is expensive, and I was having trouble providing for my family. My wife and I were both working. We had 2 small children.
Mm-hmm.
We were crammed into a little apartment, and there was a lot of emotional weight on that, especially with people coming at me again, claiming to be friends, but kind of using that emotional weight, the troubles you're going through, to kind of like lean on me and tell me that I wasn't doing things right, that I was And when we got to Austin, it was even more difficult. I had to take a job in a movie theater, but oddly enough, some of the opportunities that I thought I left behind followed me to Texas.
Okay.
And that inspired me. We moved into a house with a garage, and I remember hearing in one of the the original Evil Dead behind the scenes, that they shot some of the scenes literally in a garage. And so I just started thinking about, like, well, what can I do with what I have? I know how to do miniatures. I know how to do cheap monsters. I know how to do all this stuff. And I know how to write.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about, just in terms, it didn't start at first with, thinking about the audience, actually. It was just in terms of what could I do? And one of the things I thought was interesting was that people kind of form visual vocabularies in their movies, like Stanley Kubrick and David Lynch, especially, create visual vocabularies. And I started thinking to myself, well, what's my vocabulary going to be? I know how to use camera angles, and I know how to edit and that sort of thing. So what am I going to do? And I started thinking about how I loved reading the work of Carl Jung, the psychologist. And what I discovered was, if you're going to use Carl Jung as a visual vocabulary, you better be prepared to dive into your own psyche in ways that are essential. I don't do drugs. People will watch this and go, this guy's like tripping on psychedelics or mushrooms or whatever. None of that is the case. It's all a result of me kind of diving into myself. And that included diving into the worst parts of myself, diving into the places that I thought or was being told that I was being a failure or a bad person or that sort of thing, and realizing that there was a lot there that I could fortify. And I was seeing a lot of people around me, again, young men especially, but also men my own age, kind of falling into this crippling mentality, this mentality that was crippling them emotionally and making it difficult for them to be able to deal with anything, because they didn't want to offend anybody, or they didn't come across as being too aggressive and or oppressive, which is something that is laid on young men a lot.
Yeah, I've done many videos on the subject, or the concept of quote unquote toxic masculinity, and the vilification of just being just being male first and foremost, as though that in and of itself is a flaw that has to be apologized for the rest of your life or something, in the absence of any actions or otherwise that would actually mark you as an individual as a bad person. You're already expected to be a bad person. And that's something that I'm not a big fan of, I'd say. And it sounds like you're not either.
Well, no, for the most part, again, it's just I started to realize that I was, and it's interesting because the main character is a woman, and the main character is a woman who's just coming out of a lesbian relationship. And the reason that I did that originally was because I wanted to address the issue that you could write a gay character without that just being their personality.
Right.
But that was what I was telling myself. What I didn't realize was that I was making that choice out of something going on in my subconscious. Something in my subconscious said, these are the characters you need to make. And they instantly started talking to me, and interacting with each other. And that was what I was writing down in the script were these interactions. And I didn't quite know what these interactions meant. And I said to myself, like, look, don't try and figure everything out right away. You will discover what this stuff means. And honestly, I've watched the movie back several times now, and I'm seeing things coming out of it that are things from my own psyche that I go like, geez, I hope a psychiatrist doesn't watch this movie and go like, look, man, I think I can help you. But you can tell by the way that the characters behave, and certain characters, without spoiling anything, meet their demise is kind of through what we can learn about ourselves, whether we choose to be strong and acknowledge what we are and work with that, or try and pretend to be something that we're not, and let those weaknesses constantly dominate us and make us behave in ways that are contrary to our to who we truly are, and act in our own self-interest or against it.
So then, just to be sort of abstract, because again, by the way, guys, there's links to all of, or not, maybe not all, but a good portion of Christopher's stuff in the description. Twitter, trailer for the movie, his Patreon, whole 9 yards. Be sure to check those out. So is there then, trying to look for some deeper meaning here, as everything else, what is, in reality, or your interpretation now, what is the quantum terror? I mean, what is it that everybody's scared of in this instance?
Well, let's see. I'll kind of backpedal a little bit into some of the aspects of what's going on in the broad sense of this movie, because it's my hope that people will, kind of like David Lynch said, and I'll do my best David Lynch impersonation. Sometimes a writer will write a story, and then that writer will die, and there's no one there to explain the story. I'll stop there.
That was a great Lynch. Yay!
Thank you. But I don't want to deprive people of, if I go too much into what I think the meaning of the story is.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
I'll say this. The meaning keeps changing for even me. I keep seeing new things in it. And it's my hope that whoever watches it might see a little of themselves, and maybe 10 years down the line, watch it again and see something new. I think that I was successful in making something that'll be useful in that way. The broad sense of what the quantum terror is, there's three things. Like I said, there's the Carl Jung visual vocabulary. Mm-hmm. There's the kind of the meditative approach that Lynch takes, and I kind of lump that together with the Jungian vocabulary, because I think Lynch is diving into that territory as well, and so is Stanley Kubrick. Those are the two directors that I admire the most in terms of of how they think about their movies. There's also the quantum physics aspect of it, which is I lump together in with the H.P. Lovecraft stuff, because the world of H.P. Lovecraft and his take on the occult kind of tracks with what I would watch on the Science Channel, which to me, the Science Channel is kind of like the tabloid sensationalist version of science. You should take it with a grain of salt. It's not all real science. It's a lot of speculation and a lot of what ifs in there that they kind of act like it's real science, but there's there's no real math behind, as far as I can tell. There's no real math behind things like multiverses or anything like that, or
right. It's all theory. It's mostly theory, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah, it's speculation and what ifs, and but sometimes they don't tell you that. They just kind of lump it all in together. So there's kind of that sensationalist science that I think tracks well with H.P. Lovecraft in terms of alternate dimensions and non-Euclidean geometry and 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional space. And then there's actually a meta aspect of the quantum terror where, if you won't spot it if you're not looking for it. But I kind of was also influenced by how Alan Moore with The Watchmen, there's a whole meta aspect that people miss in The Watchmen too, and why it only really truly works as a graphic novel, because the whole idea of Dr. Manhattan is that he realizes he's in a comic book and he has the ability to flip back and look at the different pages just like we, the viewer, are. Right. So in a way, the viewer in the Quantum Terror gets to be one of the higher beings.
Okay.
The idea that small spoiler, but one of the characters says this is only a second, and then 24 frames flash at you. The idea is that these beings can, and again, without spoiling it, but the movie comes full circle in a way that if you wanted to watch it over again, it's like continuing the story.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on that way. There's a lot of clues. There's a lot of subliminals. Some of it is cheeky. Some of it is giving you more clues of what's going on. And I'm hoping some of it gives people things to think about that, if they were to put themselves in the situation of the characters and ask themselves how would they behave differently, it might be something. Again, I'm not telling them, but I'm hoping it helps them reach conclusions that are useful to them. And for each individual audience member, those conclusions should be different. I don't want everybody to reach the same conclusion.
Yeah, no, I never felt like I was having myself led around by the nose or anything. There's I don't know exactly what the perfect balance is, but you have to strike the balance between, like you said, giving the audience enough information that they can follow along, but at the same time, at least respecting their intelligence, that you don't need to hit them over the head with every single, this is what's happening, or this is what the character's thinking, or try to get a performance out of an actor rather than having to say dialogue and something like that. So.
Yeah. Oh, and I should say that the actors, by the way, acting is very difficult in this. You don't have the talent pool, but the actors that I found, we had such a good time, and it was such a new experience for them. There was a lot of joy in them seeing how I made sets in my own house, and the cheap way I did. I know, not the cheap, the low budget way.
Yes.
That I made special work, and
the economical way. The
economical way. But I had such fun with the actors, and I'm so pleased with the performances that they gave. I really want to give a shout out to them. They really are stars, all of them. We had so much fun. The wonder on that I got from them when they saw, like, okay, this is what we're doing today. And at first it was like confusion, like, we're doing what? And then when they saw it on the screen, we recently did a screening at a Halloween haunt, and a couple of the actors showed up. Matt Blackwell and Jordan Michael Brinkman showed up, and two things really stuck out for me that were really gratifying. One was just after the movie was done, and they'd seen it before, but not on a big screen. They were just like, I can't believe we did that all in your house. It does look like, we're underground in another world.
Yeah.
And that was really gratifying. And the other thing too was just like Matt Blackwell, who plays the antagonist in the movie.
Yes.
Like I was hearing the audience as the movie's going, like cursing under their breath at him, which was really fun for me because Matt is in real life, of course, a really nice guy, and I want to work with him again. And I'm just like, but I'm at the same time, I'm a little worried. Like, I hope they don't see him after and like decide to pick a fight with him because, so things like that were a lot of fun. And I definitely, I'll let you take the lead with the questions, but I hope that, we get to talk a little bit more about the sets and the effects at some point in this conversation, because that's...
Well, I was gonna get to that because, yeah, like you say, until just now, I didn't know, obviously, how you made the movie. And if you did it all like in your house or in your garage or whatever. I mean, obviously you can tell that this is not a Hollywood production, but at the same time, the amount of value you got out of what you did and setting up distinct locations that you could tell, okay, I know that I'm here. And I'm not sitting on like, grandma's living room or something like you see some old cheap movies where it's like they filmed this in grandma's living room because the couch has got the floral design on it or something like that. But no, I felt like they were in tunnels when they were in tunnels, and I felt like they were in a different place when they're in a different place. So how big of a team, how big of a crew did you have aside from yourself and the cast in making this film?
I had myself, and I had director of photography, Anthony Gutierrez, doing Steadicam work about half the time. Half the time he was there and half the time it was just me because he was in Dallas and I'm in Austin. So I tried to match his camera work the best I could, but the best camera shots are definitely his. And Jenna Green, who she was on the Sci-Fi Makeup Challenge show Face Off season 4. She did a lot of makeup and special effects with me. And then as far as just people on the set, there were people coming and volunteering. Brent Dickerson, who is a local, he actually is a groundskeeper at the Halloween Haunt. He came and helped a lot, and different volunteers came in and helped for free. Heather Lowe did a lot of the miniature work. Matter of fact, she did pretty much all of it. Jenna did a couple of pieces, but she actually took my measurements that I gave her, and she does doll houses and that sort of thing for her kids.
Okay.
And so she built miniature tunnels. And that was pretty much it. It was just very minimal crew and of course a minimal cast and a lot of shooting on weekends. The sets, all those tunnels, if you see an actor in it, it's a life-size tunnel. I built it in my garage. They're actually made out of styrofoam sheets painted to look like concrete.
Nice.
The tunnel entrance is a tunnel that was across the street from where I was living at the time. So I just had the actors pretend that they were ducking into the tunnels, and then we cut to the sets. And what I did was I actually, one of my favorite horror movies is Silence of the Lambs. And one of the things that I really loved about Silence of the Lambs is you kept cutting to direct POV, and they did a lot of shooting where the angle a lot of the shots were dead on someone's face. Yes. And if the angle altered a little bit, in the interactions between Clarice or Hannibal Lecter, it's like if one, in their verbal sparring, if somebody started to lose in that sparring, they started to get more off kilter and the other character would get more dead center.
Right.
But, a lot of times you were getting their point of view, which was, literally had actors looking into the camera. And what I realized what I could do there is, because we had such small sets, if we had, if we cut to a miniature with a monster in it or something like that, I didn't want to do a bunch of green screen. Green screen is hard to pull off, and it's a pain in the butt if you've got green screen shot after green screen shot. So I wanted to keep that to a minimum. So I thought, okay, if early on we keep doing what they did in Silence of the Lambs and just show their point of view, different characters' point of view, the audience will get used to that shooting technique. So when we cut to a miniature and just say it's a character's point of view, the audience won't go, "Oh, now we're cutting to a miniature."
Mhm.
They'll more readily accept it than just doing the character's point of view.
Right.
It's shooting techniques like that that really were a lot of fun to do, and there's so
Sorry,
many.
real quick, Chris. I think my mic is gaining out in the oblivion there, and sometimes that happens. It bleeds you out. So I'm just going to talk for a second to try to reset my mic volume, and then I apologize. I have no idea. Anybody out there who's an audio file have any idea why a stationary microphone would just suddenly out of nowhere decide to jump the gain up and then bring it back down? Because I can't. Nobody else. This doesn't happen to anybody else. I'm like cursed or something.
Do you have a global mic or is it more of a shotgun mic?
I've got a Yeti, a Blue Yeti, just like a global mic, but it's directional facing front. And the only thing that's a little bit different is I have some audio software acting as the go-between. And maybe there's some setting I've got off or something on there, but for whatever reason, it just does this from time. I'm so paranoid about it because I'm doing something like this. I don't want to bleed you out. Sorry, guys, for the misdirection or anything, but it's just I don't know how it's to remedy this, and it annoys me that I'm having to pause in the middle of everything to try to manually or audibly reset my microphone. So anyway, I'll have to look that up on my own elsewise. So sorry, I apologize for interrupting, but live TV and all that fun stuff. I meant to ask because maybe this is sort of like asking a woman what her age is. What was your production budget on this?
It depends on how you want to look at it. I think in actual, money spent, probably around $15,000. But if you want to account all the sweat equity, as my buddy Alec Gillis calls it, when he was making his movie Harbinger Down, I would say that maybe you could jump it up to anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 in terms of, because I had, Alec and his partner Tom at Studio ADI, who've done, everything from Alien 3 to Tremors to Starship Troopers to all that stuff. They had some tentacle mechanisms that, as a thank you for me helping with them with their movie Harbinger Down, they sent these cable controlled tentacles out to me.
Cool.
Are according to Alec, I think they on their own were worth $15,000 each, something like that.
Whoa.
So of course I didn't get to keep those. But
well, hey, a loaner for free is better than nothing. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool. And then my friend Paul Ketty over at Makeup Effects Group in Australia did some Photoshop work. Heather did all the miniatures for free. Jenna worked for way below her rates. So did Anthony. There were a lot of things, favors called in and people volunteering and years of work. I mean, my friend Derek did some of the music. He was originally going to do all of it, but life events happened with him and he was doing it for free. And he contributed a lot to the movie aside from music. So he was like, oh man, I'm letting you down with the music. I was like, no, life happens, and this movie couldn't happen at all without your help. He was a real patron. But I know he spent money on my movie that he's never disclosed to me how much, but I know it's there, and I'm grateful for that. So, this is probably, like I said, a $30,000 to $60,000 movie. My one regret with this movie overall is the camera we had was a Canon 7D, which for a while that was like the hot camera when it first came out, but now it's like you've got, and I have one now, a Blackmagic pocket cinema camera. I wish I had a bit of a better quality camera to shoot on, but overall I think the movie itself is was very successful, and a a lot of the special effects tricks are things that I learned, like I said, from watching those behind the scenes. Sorry, it's a delivery truck going by, which is the mortal enemy of my dachshund. One of my favorite shots is when they come to a dead end and they've got to climb down another.
Yes.
That was a trick that I learned from Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter on Dark Star. That tunnel is made out of styrofoam. There's no way they could climb that tunnel.
Right.
We laid the tunnel down, and we had the actors crawling, pretending to climb. We just flipped the camera.
That's what I assumed happened, because I was looking at that. I remember that scene specifically, and I was thinking, that's poor man's process right there. I mean, it's good looking. It looks good, and that concrete looks like concrete. But I caught that. I've seen enough movies, so now I saw what you did there. But it was really well done.
Thank you. Well, yeah, that's the thing. People who know will know what to look for, but general audiences, they don't. And when you tell them, like I said, that was literally, and I have a Substack where I post photos and videos of how I did stuff. It's literally, a combination of that. The tunnel was so light we could stand it up. So we did have some shots where the actors are standing on the ground and pretending to hang on, or there's miniatures. When the monster comes down, that's a miniature, and the monster, the puppet that's about this big, that Jenna made and designed, and I really love it. And a lot of the monsters are made out of packing tape. You build packing tape around an object, and it gets stiff enough where you can cut it open, pull the object out, and then you can put your hand up it like a puppet. Yeah. A lot of spring-loaded stuff, a lot of reverse photography, a lot of tricks like that. One of my favorite tricks is, again, talking about asking the actors to do things where they're just going like, "Are you out of your mind? Why am I doing this?" And then seeing the result after is, when there's one of the actors, again, without giving it, falls down a tunnel.
Yes.
And I had her. Essentially, we stood the tunnel up because it was only about 9 feet high, maybe 10. I don't know. It was, not much taller than they were.
Right.
So I had her in the tunnel, jumping up and down. I said, jump up as high as you can and then squat down.
Yes.
And okay. And so I held the camera and I would do it with her. We were literally doing jump squats. And she's like, "Why are you having me do this? This is, like, not angrily, but just like, perplexed.
Yeah.
What are we doing?" And then I took those shots and I cut all of them together. And what I had like little bits of the pieces of wood that they hang on to pass in front of the camera. So cutting them all together, you don't see her jumping up and down. You just see these things rushing past as her hair's flying in the air, and it looks like she's falling down.
Yes.
It's just, editing is the best special effect. So I had so much fun, and this is really why I want to make movies. Is, like I said, story-wise, I want to write to a certain audience, and we talked about that. Yeah. But for the most part, I find that, here's the other thing. People always say story first, story first, story first. Of course, you want a good story, but one of the things that I think a lot of writers never keep in mind, and why there's so many bad comic books that are obviously movie scripts that they didn't get to use, is because people don't fall in love with the medium and all the things the medium can do, and they don't write to that.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of low budget filmmaking, low budget special effects. And I absolutely love, writing to that, to going like, these are the resources I have. These are the things I can do. How do I tell a story around that? Just like I love going to see plays, because playwrights know how to write to the stage, and why Alan Moore is such a good comic book writer, because he writes to the medium of comic books, and that's why they're so successful. If you try and shoehorn your story into any medium that you think is, like I said, a lot of screenwriters are like, "I'll just do a graphic novel because that's, I can do anything I want in there," but they just end up writing a really boring graphic novel. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Are we getting questions in the chat? I don't have my glasses.
People are fairly they're attentive. They're attentive. That's what they are. Hello, everybody. Yeah, no, I've in doing the YouTube stuff, I've found a lot of times that I'll write a script for something, and I think I know how it's going to be, but I always think to myself, how am I going to represent that visually or something? And I just say to myself, well, you'll figure that out in editing, because oftentimes I'll come up with ideas of how to express something or how to put something together, or something I didn't think about will come up in the editing process that I either have to record new audio for, or I just put together visually to go along with the audio that I hadn't imagined. Because, and also, as I'm putting things together, I realize this can't be here. You have to learn, as they say, to kill your darlings. Sometimes you think something's so good before you get there, and then it's like, this doesn't work, and I need to take it out or change it or whatever else.
There's literally days worth of shooting in the Quantum Terror that just didn't get full days, where other people were like, I have to put this in here. I spent money on it. It's like, yes, you have to let it go. And there's a saying, I don't know if I made this up, but I think I didn't. I'm pretty sure I didn't, which is like, the final draft of your script is the final cut of the film. It's, you're not done until the story isn't done being processed until then. But I write to what's available to me, and I write to the edit. I do think about the edit while I'm writing, and then I shoot for the edit. Everything is for the edit. And the story, the script that I finished right now that we're probably going to be shooting in September, it only works as a movie because so much of what makes it engaging and interesting and special, it revolves around our ability to edit. Because my producer was like, this almost reads like a stage play. We could do this like a stage play. I'm like, maybe, but the whole idea is it's a movie written around clever editing, and you can't do it on the stage. So, there you go.
And I think the other quote that always comes to my mind, and I always, for some reason, I attribute this to Francois Truffaut, but I'm probably sure somebody will tell me he didn't come up with it. But it's the a masterpiece is never completed, only abandoned. So how do you handle? And I guess maybe we'll reach wrapping up with this. How do you handle feeling successful, but also having that nagging feeling that you could have done it better? How do you reconcile those two things? I'm sure you have that happen too.
Well, this actually goes back, because you talked about how I visualize success, and I don't think I actually answered that. I think
I don't think we got there, but hey, now's a good time as any.
Yeah, I think so. To me, success is first and foremost finishing. It is, there are so many filmmakers, writers, comic book artists, whatever. You hear for years and years how they're working on something, but they never finish it. And
George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, exactly. Now he's collected plenty of paychecks, so maybe that's success in his mind. And I am a capitalist. I do want to make money doing this because I want to dedicate. I mean, being a capitalist means that if I'm successful financially, I get to dedicate all of my energy to this while providing for my family, and I can on creating the best that I can do. Talk for a moment to your repeat James.
Oh, is it doing again? Oh no! God. Okay, after this, I'm going to go to the wonderful world of Twitter and put up my settings on my audio thing and say, somebody help me. I want to address this. I want to nip it in the bud. This doesn't happen to other people. Why? Why am I cursed like this? Because right now, the one thing that I'm more paranoid about than anything else going live on anything is I'm just going to suddenly go, and I'm not going to have any ability to do anything about it. So,
all right, well, we're good now. So
back up and try again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So, like I said, finishing a project, because the people that I realized were the people who are bogging me down with, negativity, trying to get me to stop focusing on what I'm doing and work on what they want, which I also historically, here's the thing, when I would help these people, I would do the work, I would give them what they want, and then they would abandon it over and over again. they would never finish. And so for me, the Quantum Terror took 7 years to finally complete, from conception to now. And my whole thing was, I'm not letting go of this movie. Too many people have helped me. And their work is worth something to them beyond money. They want to see this movie finished as well. So finishing a film is successful. Now, if you feel like you're going to get to the finish line with a movie that you're not happy with, sometimes you just have to accept that it's not everything you thought it could be, but get to the finish line, because the trap is you could keep noodling at it and refining it and trying to get it right, and it'll never be finished. So, ultimately you got to get to a point where you finish the film, you get it out there to an audience, and then you let them decide if it's good or not, because I'm a firm believer in the audience is always right. And
you don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, as they say, and all that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes. Great is the enemy of good. And like I said, and that goes back to serviceable. So, trying to be good even is the enemy of serviceable. And you want to create something serviceable. If you start with just saying, I'm going to do something serviceable and I'm going to finish it, I guarantee you, maybe not the first time or the second time, but at some point, if you keep repeating, creating something serviceable and finishing it, you will get to good. And there's a very good possibility that you'll get to great. That's not up to you. That's up to the process. Just like capitalism, I love, it's not up to me whether, who gets, what kind of stories get to be told. It's up to the market. And if you cater to the market in a way, give them something that they find useful or think they need, then the market will decide. And this is my big problem. Again, with, what Disney is doing right now. I'm not going to interrupt Disney because they're my competition, and never interrupt your competition when they're making a mistake. But the whole idea is that Disney, as an example, trying to tell their audience, you're the problem.
Right.
Well, no, you're not the problem. The audience isn't the problem. The problem is that you won't accept that the audience is always right. And what I mean by that is not, the audience knows better than you how to tell a good story or anything like that. The audience as a whole, when we're in the streaming sphere and, people who analyze and critique, I'm not talking about that. The general audience will have an emotional response to what you're doing, just like I'm seeing a huge, in an Aristotelian kind of way, this huge emotional response to Stranger Things right now. The audience is always right. And if you're not getting the reaction you want, they don't need to change. And you can't. You're the one that needs to change if you want to be the one that gets to entertain them. And this is why I have a problem with, I'll give you a quick example of when I first realized this. I was at Comic-Con, maybe 2010, it was a while ago. And I was at a booth, and there was this gentleman there that was all about, we need more funding for the arts. We need more government money towards the arts. We need tax incentives and Kieverdam. Is that how you say it? My glasses aren't on, but
Kieverdam.
Yeah, Kieverdam.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate that. But as I was saying, he had these books, these graphic novels that weren't graphic novels at all. He's like, we need more funding for the arts. We need to expose more people to different cultural blah, 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 this and that. And the graphic novels he was selling or trying to sell were these illustrated, he knew Japanese, and he had translated these Japanese poems and then done illustrations to go along with them. And he was trying to sell them as graphic novels. And of course, nobody was buying them. And I realized this is a guy who he's got like a particular thing that's his thing, and, good for him. But he won't accept that nobody else wants it. He wants taxpayer money to go in his pocket so he can continue to do this thing that nobody cares about. And that's wrong, in my opinion. That was when I kind of realized, like, you can't you can't force something on an audience. You can't force an audience to pay you for something that they don't want. You have to let them decide if they want it or not. And if you want their money, if you want their time, which is more precious than money,
Yes.
you have to give them something useful, something of value. And you can't do that again, you can't make something for everybody. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't want what you're doing. And for me, the whole idea of doing these movies on a low budget is, with video on demand and the how easy it is to get your stuff to an audience. And I see this especially with the crowdfunder comics.
Yes.
You can find your niche audience, and if you can make a living doing that for that audience and focus on them, I think that audience will grow. If they like what you're doing, they'll tell their friends and more people, and that's how it should work. Yes. Disney and Paramount and all these other people, they're just throwing more and more money at doing the same thing over and over again, and getting increasingly aggravated with their audience and telling their audience they're horrible. Right. And their audience is responding by being more angry and malicious, which, again, that's a whole other conversation. I think, there is some growing up that the audience needs to do in terms of how they respond to this stuff. But
yeah, it depends on what section, because oftentimes it seems to me that a lot of the otherwise reasonable critique is then framed as being bad, or one or two people that do the absolute worst thing you could possibly do in response, they get highlighted in an article, and that's supposed to be representative of a whole swath of people, which that's not really how it is. But then it's really hard to say, because with the way rating systems work and the way that they value Rotten Tomatoes scores or whatever else these days as being meaningful to something, when it's all just, it could be done by bots, an algorithm, it could be manipulated. It's all just so amorphous that everybody wants to be right all the time about it too.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking more of I mean, I'm in my mid 40s. And I love Star Wars, and I was watching, I thought The Mandalorian was off to a great start. And I was watching these other things, and I was thinking, okay, like, I love watching Overlord DVD and,
oh yes, Doomcock.
Yeah. And Clownfish TV. And, but I started to realize I was listening to them more as a way of watching the market and seeing where I could do the right thing where these companies were screwing up. But then I started to realize that there's a certain mentality that we have where, like, I don't agree with Doomcock in terms of, he always says he's working to save pop culture. Well, I don't think it's through trying to, in any way, shape, or form, take back Star Wars or Star Trek or anything like that. I think it's more of just like, it's time to go, you know what? I'm an adult. I love Star Wars for what my childhood was, and I can revisit that anytime. But I don't need to spend time being upset about, what, they're doing with Kenobi right now. I'm just going to work on new things that will be mine and speak to the audience in the way that I do. And that's the audience that I'm approaching. I think that, at a certain point, you just need to go, like, I'm an adult. I need to walk away from this. And I will always love fantasy, and that's what I do. I'm going to do more horror movies and grindhouse style sci-fi. A lot of it's going to be not intentionally offensive, but it's going to be more adult in terms of, I'm definitely not making material for children for the most part.
Just accidentally offensive.
Yeah, offensive,
yeah, collaterally offensive.
Well, it's like I like Shakespeare because Shakespeare, held a mirror up to reality, as he said, and he showed the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for me, it's like subjects of greed or abuse or sex, of what things that we want to, as an audience, kind of look at in a way that's safe, that we can experience without actually causing any harm. But we're also confronted by these people that are saying like, oh no, doing that stuff is harmful. Well, no, it's not. People need an outlet. They need to be able to explore things that they're curious about. And so I want to be able to do that, to help people explore things that they're curious about, and entertain, all that stuff. But, it's like, for me, I can't get bogged down into like, when you get into the actual like canonical lore of Star Wars and nitpick how this writer got this wrong or this. It's like, yes, that's true, and those things are important in storytelling. But if the writers and the producers are showing you that they don't care and they're just going to throw whatever, slap Star Wars on whatever and push it out to you, it's like, well, if you don't care, then I don't care, and I don't need to care. I'm here to tell stories that do matter to me, and if they matter to you, then follow me, and I promise that I'll do my best to honor that, and that's where I'm at.
That is a great sentiment. And in that vein, everybody, be sure to check out the links in the description to Christopher's Twitter, trailer for Quantum Terror, as Patreon, and I think I threw a couple other things in there. So now, Christopher, where I know where to find it, but where can people currently find Quantum Terror, and where will they soon be able to find Quantum Terror?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who came to listen to this live. I really appreciate all of you. It's really, the fact that anybody pays attention to me is just makes me so happy.
That's my thinking every day. Every single day I come on YouTube and somebody shows up, I'm like, oh, thank God.
I mean, the worst thing an artist can experience is apathy for their work.
Yes.
So I am really grateful that you all showed up to listen. And A Scanner Daftly. I love that name. That's great. I have read that book, A Scanner Darkly, along with Neuromancer. Wait, no, those are different authors, but same genre. But let's see. Let me click over to so I don't forget any of these. So I have uploaded to what's called Film Hub, and Film Hub is it's not a distributor, it's a sales platform. So I'm self-distributing through them, and they are wonderful. So right now, there's two places you can watch The Quantum Terror. One is on Zumo, or some people pronounce it Eximo. So I might be pronouncing it wrong. It's XUMO. And I've been told that people are having trouble finding it on there, except if they go to the website. If they try and stream it through like their Fire Stick or Smart TV or Roku, they have trouble finding it. I can't watch movies on my computer, so I want people to be able to find it on those. However, I'm really thrilled to announce that at some point soon, and they don't give me release dates, so I apologize, you're going to have to keep checking back, but Tubi, which is one of my favorite streaming apps, has picked it up, and it has been delivered, so look for it on there. It's also, if you're in Brazil, it's going to be on Box Brazil Play. Filmzy, which is international, it's a worldwide platform, so if you're in another country, it's going to be on there. Look Hue, which I also think is international. Now this one I'm really excited about, which is Mercudo Libre. It's Spanish, and the by the way, I have subtitles in 7 different languages other than English. I've got them in Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, Korean, French, German, and Italian. So if you need subtitles in any of those languages, they are available. If you go to Gumroad, you can download it with any of those subtitles. But Mercudo Libre, which I'm probably horribly butchering the pronunciation of, is the Spanish version of Amazon. They are like the biggest provider of goods like Amazon.com is, and they are launching their own version of Amazon Prime, which is that. And it's going to be one of the premier movies on there. So I'm really excited about that. It's also going to be on Free Movie Channel soon. And hopefully it gets picked up by more people after that. So I am very thrilled that it's available on all those platforms. We are also going to be working on some DVDs, and if things go well with the interest, then I will also be working on special edition Blu-rays that I'll probably do a crowdfunder for, that'll have special features, commentary, all that good stuff, maybe a remaster of the audio. So, this is very exciting, and I want you to keep with me on my social media, because I am currently producing 4 other movies that range from science fiction to horror. I've written scripts that I'm very excited about. And like I said, I write my scripts to shoot the way I want to shoot them. They're not Hollywood scripts. They're different. Although Quantum Terror is the most surreal, meditative, metaphysical, surrealist movie that I'll make. My next movies will be a little more general audience, but with crazy stuff that Hollywood would never do, because they would see it as something that was way higher budget than what I'm capable of doing, and they see the ideas as high risk. So the low budget thing is a good way of also taking risks with stories that Hollywood just isn't going to do. So if you follow me, I promise you're going to get things that are, if not better than at least different from what Hollywood keeps stamping out.
Well, I mean, it's really exciting to see an independent creator have such success so far. I mean, as I said before, YouTubers are independent creators in and of themselves most of the times. We're a tribe of a kind, even though we all operate in different spheres of things. And it's as much as I think, as you mentioned, like the Hollywood and mainstream movies and streaming services and things, they're making the argument, whether they want to or not, more and more, that the good stuff is not necessarily to be found with the most well-known brand name on it. And so people really need to look out for and promote those artists and creators that you appreciate. And that's what I'm hoping to do here. And I encourage everybody else to do as well. As I say on most of my shows, if there is a YouTuber, an artist, a creator out there that you appreciate, let people know that they exist. Tweet them out, Facebook them, LimeWire, Napster, whatever you're using these days. What are the kids are using these days? Go out there and let people know they exist. And take a look at the links in the description. I put the link directly to Quantum Terror on Zumo in the chat. I'll make sure to put that in the description. Not sure why I didn't do that in the first place. And but either way, Christopher, first off, thanks so much for having me on your channel. By the way, guys, YouTube channel, links in the description to Christopher's channel. He's got 2 podcasts on there already where we talked about Lovecraft. We talked about Stranger Things. Thank you for having me on your channel. And thank you so much for coming on today and talking with me about movies and the making of your film and everything.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you so much. Yeah, I agree that the tribe of live streamers is something that I absolutely love. And I'm new to that. I've done tons of interviews over the years, which are on my YouTube channel with different professionals. But what I really love about the live streamers and what I've enjoyed about interacting with you and want to keep interacting with you is, the professionals have one point of view. The audience is what matters to me more than anything, though, because you guys are, like I said, the audience is always right. And you guys are speaking your point of view and often not being heard or being ridiculed for doing so. And I think it should be the opposite. I hope. Anyway, I could ramble on, but I am very grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Scribe, for having me on your show and providing such an intelligent interview. And thanks for your audience as well. These are people who love your show and come on here and have stuck with it the entire conversation. So it's fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, guys. No, I have the greatest audience in the world. Half the motivation for me to keep doing this stuff is having people that want to see it. I mean, obviously, I could do it just to please myself, but if there weren't people out there that also wanted to share in it with me. And some of the people you see here in the chat, they've been with me for 5 years. I had the same people that have been around since day one, practically, and I'm so grateful to you guys. And again, thanks so much to Christopher Cooksey for joining me. Everybody, go check out Quantum Terror. Follow Christopher on Twitter and keep an eye out on his YouTube channel as well. Subscribe there if you have the opportunity. I'm on there already if you really want to hear me talk some more. And everybody, again, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your weekend. Christopher, stick around a minute or two after the outro here, and then we'll chat a bit. As you know, I always love that part when, like, on the old TV shows where the camera would zoom out and the lights would dim a little bit, and the interviewer and the person they were interviewing would, like, talk a little bit like they're talking to each other. And I always wonder, what are they saying? And then one time some guy said, yeah, we don't say anything to each other. We just, like, make, I forget who it was. It was either maybe it was David Letterman or something. Says, yeah, we just mouth words at each other. We don't know what we're saying. but I'll actually talk to you. So with that, everybody, that was it. And programming note, I'll be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays, because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays, talking about a thing. I'm not sure yet. I usually pick it today. I'll probably pick it out after this. So looking forward to that. And with all of that as outro, bye.